it's important to talk about the risks and recommendations for shared access signatures. When you use shared access signatures in your applications, you need to be aware of two important potential risks. If a SAS is leaked, it can be used by anyone who has it, and that means that it can potentially compromise your storage account. If a SAS provided to the client application expires and the application is unable to retrieve a new shared access signature from your service, then the application's functionality may also be affected. There are certain recommendations for using shared access signatures that can help us mitigate these risks. Always use HTTPS to create or distribute a SAS. If a SAS is passed over HTTP and then intercepted by an attacker, then that attacker performing a man-in-the-middle attack will be able to read the SAS and then use it just as the intended user could have, and thereby it will be potentially compromising sensitive data or allowing for data corruption by the malicious user. Reference stored access policies where possible. Stored access policies give you the option to revoke permissions without having to regenerate the stored account keys. You need to set the expiration on these very far in future or sometimes infinite, and make sure it's regularly updated to move it farther into future. Use near-term expiration times on ad hoc basis. In this way, even if a SAS is compromised, it's valid only for a short time. This practice is especially important if you cannot reference a stored access policy. Near-time expiration times also limit the amount of data that can be written to the blob by limiting the time available to upload it. Have clients automatically renew the SAS if necessary. Clients should renew the SAS well before the expiration. If your SAS is meant to be used for small number of immediate, short-lived operations that are expected to be completed within the expiration period, then this may be unnecessary as the SAS is not expected to be renewed. However, if you have a client that is routinely making requests via SAS, then the possibility of an expiration comes into play. The key consideration is to balance the need for the SAS to be short-lived with the need to ensure that the client is requesting renewal early enough. Always be careful with SAS start time. If you set the start time for SAS to now, then due to clock skew, failures may be observed intermittently for the first few minutes. In general, set the start time to be at least 15 minutes in the past, or do not set it at all. Now this will make it valid immediately in all cases. The same generally applies to expiration time as well. Remember that you may observe up to 15 minutes of clock skew in either direction on any request. Be specific with the resource to be accessed. A security best practice is to provide a user with the minimum required privileges. If a user only needs read access to a single entity, then grant them read access to the single entity and not read, write, delete access to all entities. This only helps lessen the damage if a SAS is compromised because the SAS has less power in the hands of an attacker. Understand that your account will be billed for any usage, including that done with SAS. So if you provide write access to the blob, a user may choose to upload 200 gigs blob. And if you have given them read access as well, they may choose to download it 10 times. That will incur 2 terabytes in ingress costs for you. Again, provide limited permissions to help mitigate the potential actions of a malicious user. Use short-lived SAS to reduce the threat. Validate the data that is written using SAS. When a client application writes data to your storage account, keep in mind that there can be problems with that data. If your application requires that the data be validated or authorized before it is ready to use, you should perform this validation after the data is written and before it is used by your application. This practice also protects against corrupt or malicious data being written to your account. either by a user who properly acquired the SAS or by a user exploiting a leaked SAS. Don't assume SAS is always the correct choice. Sometimes the risk associated with a particular operation against your storage account outweighs the benefits of SAS. For such operations, create a middle tier service that will write to your storage account by performing business rule validations, authentications, and auditing. Use storage analytics to monitor your application. You can use logging and metrics to observe any spike in authentication failures due to an outage in your SaaS provider service or to the inadvertent removal of a stored access policy.